Wala pa ang group?
Makita ra, ma'am.
Kita dyan, kita.
Isa ang kuha na lang day. Full screen na lang. Wait lang. Kita ra?
Yes. I-play sa daang sound para ma-check kung okay.
Okay lang audio, ma'am.
Wala siya audio.
Ah.
About green buildings. It's called.
Na-guard ha.
Okay, so good day everyone. Today
Mag-start na, ma'am.
Yes, please.
I will be presenting about green buildings, its concept, applications, as well as its relevance to the environment and to the people. Okay, so without further ado, let us start. So what are green buildings? Green buildings are eco-friendly infrastructures that are sustainable on their own through the systems that are imbued within it. So eco-friendly, meaning that it is not harmful to the environment, and that the materials used and are used within it are also environmental friendly and do more good than harm. This is made possible by creating systems that have efficient use of energy, water, and materials to sustain it through the entire expected life cycle of the building, while also maintaining resiliency in the years to come. So another side note is that in response to climate change, since we can't really revert or like reverse the effects of climate change, this is a way for us to mitigate and deal with its effects for the long run. So as you can see in the picture on the right, it is a high-rise building with multiple trees situated within. So this is one way to promote green buildings, since the trees could help in improving the air quality within the infrastructure. Okay, so next we have the definition terms. So first we have the SGDs, which stand for the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and they are global goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everyone. The SGDs were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly and are intended to be achieved by the year 2030. Next, we have the turbines. Turbines are machines that produce continuous power in which a wheel or a rotor, typically with vanes, are made to revolve by a fast-moving flow of water, steam, gas, or air. So a quick example of turbines are the windmills and the water wheels, both of which produce energy through the spinning of the rotors caused by the wind and moving water. Next, we have the non-renewable energy sources. And I believe this is not new, but as a refresher, these energy sources cannot be readily replaced by natural means at a quick pace. So an example of this would be carbon-based fossil fuels, so the gas we use to power our vehicles or cars, or the gas we use in order to light up our stoves. These are examples. Next, we have the renewable energy sources, which are sources that are not depleted when used. Examples of these are wind, solar, and hydroelectric powered systems. Lastly, we have the net zero waste, which is essentially a concept that promotes to reduce, reuse, and recover waste streams and convert them into valuable resources with zero solid waste to landfills over the course of the year. Okay, so why are green buildings relevant in today's society? So first and foremost, it essentially provides effective means to achieve some of the sustainable development goals. Specifically, one, good health and well-being; two, clean water and sanitation; three, affordable and clean energy, which essentially stems from the eco-friendly energy sources promoted with a green building concept. 4. Industry, innovation, and infrastructures. 5. Sustainable cities and communities. 6. Responsible consumption and production. And lastly, 7. Climate action. So we believe that these SGDs are being applied or are being um, achieved when, not really achieved, but are close to being achieved when green buildings are in use. So the benefits of green buildings can be grouped into three categories, namely environmental, economic, and social. So for the environmental benefits, we have it enhances and protects biodiversity and ecosystems. It provides it and it improves air and water quality since like similar to the photo I showed earlier, there were like trees within the building which would help in ventilation and air quality. 3, it reduces waste streams because of the concept of the net zero waste. 4, it conserves and restores natural resources since we're technically not using non-renewable energy sources. And then for the economic benefits, we have it reduces operating costs since it's self-sustainable. It also improves occupant productivity. It enhances asset value and profits, and then it optimizes life cycle economic performance. Okay, so for the social benefits, we have it enhances occupant health and comfort since it's environmental friendly, it's eco-friendly. It improves indoor air quality, minimizes strain on local utility infrastructure, and lastly, it improves the overall quality of life. Since green buildings are designed to be self-sustainable as well as um, have a positive impact on the environment, it would also improve the quality of life of the people who use it or who are housed by it. So these are some green building examples that already exist in the world today. Okay, so first we have the Shanghai Tower in Shanghai, China. So a transparent second skin wrapped around the building creates a buffer of captured air that serves as natural ventilation, reducing energy costs. And also there are 270 wind turbines into the facade, which powers its exterior lights. I would also want to add that it generates around 350,000 kilowatt hour of supplementary electricity per year. They are expected to provide 10% of the building's electrical needs. It also captures rainwater for internal use and recycle a portion of its wastewater to be used again. So next we have the Park Royale Collection featuring in Singapore. So this is actually a hotel. So this building takes obvious inspiration from Singapore's tropical environment. The design is inspired by terraformed rice paddies, as you can see from the shape of the terraces. And numerous sky gardens have been inserted along the building's facade. So as you can see, there are several trees surrounding the terrace of the whole building in all three floors. They also deliver luxuriant greenery, including palm trees, the public areas, and guest room balconies. These also provide a natural cooling effect. So the natural cooling effect comes from obviously the trees that provide oxygen. Lastly, we have the Bahrain World Trade Center 1 and 2, located in Bahrain. So for those of you who don't know, Bahrain is actually a country situated in the Middle East. So the tower shapes, reminiscent of the Arab Dhow sailing ships, help funnel wind to the turbines. So yeah, there are like three gigantic turbines in the middle, and these turbines supply about 15% of the building's electricity. Reflected pools at the tower's base help with cooling via evaporation. There are a number of features which can make the building quote unquote green. So these factors are number one, efficient use of energy, water, and other resources. So energy efficiency is essential not only for the user, but also for the entire world because non-renewable energy sources are expensive and pollute the environment. Green building also allows for the use of alternative sources of water such as rainwater, reducing water waste through the installation of plumbing fixtures that are efficient and reducing the strain on shared water resources. by installing systems that purify water and enable recycling. 2. The use of renewable energy such as solar energy. Designers of green buildings try as much as possible to reduce dependency on energy from non-renewable sources such as coal. So to this end, they install solar panels to make use of energy from the sun and design windows in a way that allow as much natural light as possible, and therefore reduces the use of artificial light. Number 3, we have pollution and waste reduction measures and enabling of reuse and recycling. This can also be this can be related to the net zero waste concept that was discussed earlier, which is a concept that promotes people reducing their waste and reusing them, so they have zero waste that or they have zero waste to put into the landfill. Then we have the good indoor environmental air quality, which is already very self-explanatory. The use of materials that are non-toxic, ethical, and sustainable. We have consideration of the environment in design, construction, and operation. So by reducing usage of energy sources that pollute the environment, green buildings contribute to keeping the environment clean. In addition, by reducing the levels of carbon oxide rather, emitted to the atmosphere, they help to lessen the pace of climate change. Then we have the consideration of the quality of life of occupants in design, construction, and operation. So throughout the life of the building, from its construction to the end of its operation, it improves the quality of life of the people who stay in it. This means that the building efficiently aids in the activities carried out, thus upholding the features as stated above. Lastly, a design that enables adaptation to a changing environment. This is most important because, as stated at the very beginning, um, the only thing that is constant is change, and climate change has been an issue that we have that we are currently dealing and will be dealing in the future. So um, we need to build infrastructures that are not only sustainable but also could adapt to the future changes brought about by climate change. Lastly, we have why are green buildings related to the topic of sustainability? So um, in short, the aim of green buildings is to make buildings sustainable by integrating efficient use of materials in construction through recycled or environment-friendly materials. So usage of renewable energy and utilizing the environment to its advantage. Um, also applying the concept of the net zero waste is very important. Although we are able to make a fully sustainable building by applying all the procedures mentioned, we should always take into account that the environment on which the building stands. So in conclusion, green buildings are technically a concept that would help us try and mitigate the effects of climate change and try to adapt to it, because climate change will always be here and we can't really do anything about it. So we need to adapt to those changes, and the best way to do that is to start with our infrastructure, which technically house the majority of the human population. And I guess the only downside, especially in the case of the Philippines, the only downside of you know building these green buildings is that they're very expensive to construct. But aside from that, there aren't really any downsides to it, since it helps the environment, it helps the people, and it also helps in adapting to climate change. So aside from its expenses, everything else is very much recommended. These are our references, and these are my group names. Questions will be answered after this segment, but This is all we have in store for you guys, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you, green building. If I may just add, no, I don't have a, I will have time later for the question and answer portion, maybe after sa presentation sa tanan. But I'd like to add sa green building concept ni Alex and the group that green building starts with the foundation where your building stands, no? And the building may not be a shelter, housing, but it could be a building which is multi-story or any infrastructure from which we kind of think as a construction application to civil works. So ganina nag-mention si Alex that the building green building starts with the environment where your building stands, no? That means to say the very foundation of your building should be able to withstand any climatic conditions, and that's where green building begins, no? So you like kind of look at what is suitable in terms of design, aesthetics and design, or maybe architecture, of which you can really adapt to the environment where you are in. So if it is suitable for an area which is highly recommended for this type of structure or infrastructure development, if this is highly recommended because the foundation in itself is maybe promotes resiliency in the future, or maybe if we design buildings because of course we consider possible impacts to climatic conditions like disaster, flood, earthquake, or seismic conditions, maybe landslide and so forth. So again, you build or you start your building by understanding first the environment and the conditions from which your building will stand. So that basically starts with the geography of the area, or maybe the terrain, and the foundation from which your footing begins with the building foundation. So if you're able to do that and you're able to design what is appropriate for structural stability and resiliency of building structures, then you can then develop green building na dayon sa iyahang physical aspect. So when we talk about the physical aspect of the building after the foundation is when we look at physically how should our building look like, and physically looking at the things inside and outside the building. So for example, gaganina ang sample sa group is mismo ang external physical aspect sa building is a facade which looks like a green building because naa siya kaning green applications of vegetative or trees or plants, which makes the building aesthetically looks like a green building. But of course, because it incorporates the needed item, which is murag tawag na to, ako lang i-share next week, the thing called biomimicry. So biomimicry would mean you kind of adapt to the environment where your buildings stand. If it is a forest area, if it is an urban area, or if it is a landscape which is more suitable for water area, no? So landscapes of your where your building stands also enhance the aesthetic value of the building. And aside from that, you are utilizing materials from its external environment. So if it is water area, then you kind of place architectural designs related to water, or if it is related to area which is forest or mangrove area or vegetative area, so you kind of adapt to that system as well. The other end is if you are in an area or looking at area which is highly urbanized and you want to make your building be biomimicking an area which is vegetative in nature, so you can plant trees in the roof deck or plants in a certain way like a terrace, no? Para sa example ganina ni Alex, I think it was in, not if I'm not wrong, the one example in Singapore, where you do layers of planting layers of the balustrade or the balcony of the building to make the building more green in its application. That's one. Then the other one is if it's not the external, then you can also look at possibly the material that you're using for the building. So is it eco-friendly material in terms of designing your construction of a building? If it is like material use favorable to an area which have specific applications. Say for example, if mag-design mo og a building nga duol sa mga seaside areas or beach area, somehow we note fully na kung naka sa beach area, salt deposits on the air will create problems with your material, labi na kung metal siya. So kung naay mong gibuild nga building is a resort area and then you are putting structures there nga shelters or whatnot, tendency if you use material which is really metal, bisan paog ka ng jalousie window na siyang aluminum, at the end of the day, it will rust because naa ka sa seaside, and when you have seaside infrastructures na develop, nagi na siya salt deposits. And that's the reason why most cases, if you look at ka ng mga areas nga na ay resort or mga areas ng doon sa beach side, ang ilang mga balay is suitable sa organic materials na gi-use na dili susceptible sa salt deposit. Using nipa as roof, using organic materials as framework of the building, maybe bamboo, maybe rattan, or maybe kanang all forms of organic material na wood and maybe some sort of fiber being woven into something like a um, wall facade or a roofing material. That's good for building near to a resort area. Kay kung dili ka mag-build of concrete material, then anything protrusion nga metal will actually rust sa usa ka area na. And same way, if you look at areas like sa case ng example sa Taiwan, where you wanted, in case sa example nila ni Alex na, you wanted to build a building structure which is really huge, but of course it costs so much electricity. So what they did is they do wind turbine because windy ang area, and you can generate power from harnessing wind power through a wind turbine. And that wind turbine supports the building in terms of energy. According sa report ni Alex, is 15% of the energy of the twin building is actually supported by the wind power generated from the building itself. And that's the good thing of that. Other structures will also utilize solar panels as windows, no? Or they will adopt windows na tinted color or naa siyang insulation property sa iyang glass or iyang window pane material, so that it will not heat up so much the internal room temperature, and then so that therefore at the end of the day dili ka gamit og energy just because you need maybe air conditioning or heating during a specific season of the year. That's another one of looking at how you build your structure in terms of green building. The other one is you build, for example, structures of your building with high ceiling. That way, ventilation and lighting can come in, and you can afford to minimize costs in terms of lighting in the afternoon or in the evening, because high ceiling and a flow of air ventilation as well as light can just easily um, uh, can easily how to say can easily be managed through the design of the building that you are placing. Then the other one is when you look at green building inside and the system itself sa sulod, no? When you utilize maybe lighting and ventilation which are cost effective in terms of the use of bulbs, the use of air conditioning which is energy efficient, the use of maybe heater which is energy efficient, the use of water heater which is energy efficient. Everything inside that is water efficient creates that system of what we call a green building. Down to when you kind of collect water or rainwater catchment from your roofing area, then you can actually harness water from what we call as rainwater catchment. Or if you utilize or recycled water from your uh, domestic use and use that water as gray water for your facility, no? So those are things that are considered in green building, because after all, ang thinking po nato sa green building is not just the material outside and inside, but also kind of the system inside the building, including ang fact na when you kind of use recyclable material for your maybe non-structural part of the building, the roofing, the tiling, no? Ang mga furniture inside, if you're using material which are organic and green, because it can easily be of high quality, and at the end of the day, it's biodegradable. Those things are part of green building. In Cagayan de Oro, we already have one subdivision that is promoting green building in the in the city of Cagayan. It's kind of, as mentioned by Alex, a bit expensive at the start because materials being used are quite expensive. But at the end of the day, you are promoting um, green building in the long run because everything inside the building is efficient. Everything inside in the building is inside and outside the building is sustainable. In fact, napod sila yung mga system nga kung naa sila yung waste sa ilang facility, ilara na i-treat and then balik lagi po sa facility for any domestic application. So dili sila ga create og waste kay within po sa facility ilang mga solid waste sa facility is treated and then at the same time recycled. Those things are part of green building application. The important aspect of green building is when you build your material on a very good foundation, when you use material which is of good quality, organic, and material which are aesthetically of value, within rasad sa inyong community, dili mo kailangan mag-import ana nga material kay dinha ra po ninyo gigamit. Or when you're promoting green application within the building, or you using a system within the building now creates the sustainable effort of the building, or when you design the building in such a way that the ihang overall design is made to ensure ventilation, lighting, and energy saving application. And of course, and we utilize conservation of energy and conservation of recycling of your waste and reusing of your water application. May it be for water management, which is wastewater, or rainwater catchment, or recycling of your water, which is used in the building. So that's all packaged under green building application. Okay? Sige, let's move on to the next reporter, Dai. Thank you for the first group.
Pleasant day to
Madunggan,
everyone.
ma'am.
I am Chab Trinity Bukino, the groupmate
Hello,
of
hello.
King Brian Santos.
Madunggan na, madunggan na.
Inay lang gamay.
A pleasant day.
Murag way audio, bray. Nawa.
Hello, hello? Nawala?
Oh, wala audio.
Ay, wait lang. Kana na others?
Kulag yapon.
Oh, no.
Tradition,
Kana,
na.
of the city,
Oo.
its people,
Okay.
is directly
Wala siya sound. Something's wrong with the audio sa inyong video. Nag-play na siya pero wala sound.
Wait lang, ma'am. Wait lang.
Him, kung malanganin mo, we'll move on to the next group na lang sa muna.
One,
Ano, ma'am?
I'm Job Green Bukingo, the groupmate of Kimber and Santos in General Building. And I'll be presenting to you today the topic
Hello?
on sustainable urban
Oh,
development.
No.
Let's get right into it. What is sustainable urban development? According to Wheeler 2012, sustainable urban development is creating cities and towns that improve the long-term health of the planet's human and ecological systems. Based on the definition, the prosperity of the city and its people is directly proportional to the preservation of the environment. It is explicitly said here that a smart and automated way of life is only achievable through sustainable or green practices. Now, why is sustainable urban development important? First, cities are able to have the capacity to create jobs. If a city has prospered through sustainable methods, it has more capacity to create jobs because of resource abundance, emergence of new fields and disciplines, or availability of manpower. Therefore, a sustainable city has an active economy because of the efficient way of life, thus leading to the second reason, economic growth. There has been a saying that economic growth is not sustainable in a finite planet, and that very much is true. If mankind continues to overexploit resources, it is only a matter of time until the environment is depleted and the economy no longer has any means to bounce back. Third reason is social inclusion. It is a process of improving the terms on which individuals and groups take part in society. A well-developed urban city gives more opportunities for its citizens to actively participate and become voices of change. This much is related to the first reason, which is having more jobs to distribute to the populace. Fourth is decoupling living standards. Now, what does this mean? What is decoupling? Decoupling is a reduction of amount of resources to generate economic growth. Basically, a rising GDP of a country does not have to put unnecessary pressures on the environment. This simply means resources do not need to be overexploited to have a rise in the economy. Fifth is protection of ecosystems. Of course, as sustainable urban development uses clean and green practices, ecosystems, local or regional, are well preserved. And lastly, with all of these effects collating together, a drastic decline in poverty can be observed. Poverty would obviously be reduced since jobs are made available to a lot of people, living standards no longer rely on sustainable practices, and all members of the population are given the chance to become more socially involved. Now, let's talk about the applications of sustainable urban development. UBEL 2012, a doctorate of electrical engineering, points 6 applications of sustainable urban development. First is in mapping and analysis of urban sprawl. Before we discuss this, what is an urban sprawl? An urban sprawl is the unrestricted urban expansion of a city, expansion by virtue of housing and commercial development. However, this is bad as promising as it sounds, because it has little concern for urban planning, as a result, compromising the environment. In this application, the goal is to make technology work for the deprived, which involves determining a multidimensional poverty index, informal settlements detection, spatial contextual information, improve wash conditions, or basically inadequate water, sanitation, and hygiene, visual pollution maps in slums, determining women's mobility, and improvement of education, health, and living standards. Next, urban mobility informatics. The application aims to understand the mobility of inhabitants in a city by assessing impact of mobility in the environment, impact on infrastructure and resources, detect traffic anomalies, track female and senior community mobility, and to understand differentiated travel demands and supply-demand mobility imbalance. Being able to find the factors that cause the imbalance shall help us understand how the current situation of the economy in terms of supply and demand affects mobility among its citizens. Next, sustainable urban logistics solutions. The main goal here is to foster better services, which can be determined by reduced CO2 and pollutant emissions, efficient freight transportation, optimized customer service level, increased asset utilization, data-driven quality checks, better track and trace services, supply chain productivity, and data-driven performance monitoring. Smart waste management, last but not the least. And this is a very important application since its goal is a better environment. Its indicators are a generally healthy population, reduction in waste collection cost, efficient waste generation analysis, CO2 emission reduction, and effective waste hotspot monitoring. Now, it is actually noteworthy that reduction in waste collection costs is an indication that proper and sustainable policies in waste management were implemented. Tracking and countering air pollution. So we have more, the last two. The goal is better air quality, which is achieved by determining pollution hotspots and a PM2.5 spatio-temporal quantification. Now, this is called PM2.5 because the diameter of fine particulate matter is 2.5 microns. The saturation of 2.5 particulate matter is what is used to measure air quality index, in which at high saturations would spell disasters for health. The determination of major pollution sources, building clusters with emissions, understanding brick kiln contribution, or simply the carbon emissions of factories and the like, and effective assessment of impact on health are also steps necessary in tracking and countering air pollution. Now, tracking disease and vaccine coverage. This application recently rose to importance because of the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic. The goal here is better health care, achieved by addressing disproportionate repercussions of the pandemic, enhancing urban risk preparedness, strengthening emergency response capacity, enhance cities' capacities as laboratories of innovation, and adopting a resilient and sustainable tourism. Okay, motivation and relevance of the topic. Achieving urbanization will be the trend in the coming years, especially in countries that experience poverty. The number of slum inhabitants has expanded dramatically in several nations in recent years, and urban inequality is growing. As we can recall, one of the reasons why sustainable urban development is important is it reduces poverty. By practicing sustainable urban development, we can effectively combat urban inequality caused by poverty. If sustainable practices are implemented now, it is possible to provide a better future for the deprived and the marginalized sectors of our community. Now, what does the world need an urban SDG? First is to educate and focus attention on urgent urban challenges and future opportunities. It's really important for us to be educated and for us to focus on the several challenges, both new and old, to understand what it is that we must be doing to address these concerns. Next, mobilize and empower all urban actors around practical problem solving. Yes, obviously this means all members of the society are mobilized and empowered to provide solutions. Whether you may be an engineer or a vendor or a janitor or any kind of profession, as long as you are a member of an urban city, you get to participate and get mobilized when it comes to achieving an urban sustainable development goal. Third, address specific challenges of urban poverty and access to infrastructure. Now, it is really important that these challenges are addressed because in the coming years, as we said in the motivation and in the relevance of this topic, urban poverty and life in the slums is rising as the years go by. And we cannot allow that to rise out of control to a point that we can no longer do anything, or it will be hard to fix the ramifications or to rectify the bad effects that it causes. And access to infrastructure is also important because infrastructure is the core at which the society or any unit of the society, both family and companies or organizations, are able to function. Fourth, promote integrated and innovative infrastructure design and service delivery. So what is innovative infrastructure design? These are infrastructures that implement new practices and new ways of designing structures that is more sustainable and more efficient. Simply, these are not only new and innovative, quote unquote, but these are also infrastructures that has a maximized use. It means that people are able to utilize every aspect. So its usability and its serviceability are maximized. That is the main thought of innovative infrastructure design. Next is promote land use planning and efficient spatial concentration. As we said, urban sprawl is one of the effects of poor urban planning. And therefore, we need to promote land use planning because we need to make sure that land is efficiently used and the right infrastructures and the right people are placed on these locations. Lastly, ensure resilience to climate change and disaster risk reduction. Throughout the years, climate change has been on the rise. It is really integral for us to be able to combat its effects, especially the rising sea levels in which we may have to craft more solutions for in the future. Now, why is the topic related to sustainability? Now, sustainable development helps countries grow in ways that respond to the issues of climate change. And there are three primary objectives of sustainable development. First is economic growth, which was already mentioned previously. Next is environmental protection, something I have always repeated throughout the presentation. Environmental protection is directly proportional to a sustainable economic growth. And lastly, social inclusion, which is again the state in which all members of the society get to participate in economic growth. Sustainable urban development is a key for cities to reduce effects of climate change. Sustainable urban development includes, first, access to opportunities and resources. Next, a healthy mix of modes of transportation. And third, a cheap financial and environmental costs. And most of all, great resilience to disaster, which is something all cities must have to combat the future impending effects of climate change. Now, in sustainable urban development, why is there access to opportunities and resources? Because as I said, because of sustainable practices, we do not overexploit the environment. As a result, we have a lot of resources to utilize because we have allowed the environment to heal and we have been responsible in harvesting from the resources that are around us. Therefore, in a sustainable urban development practice, there is access to more opportunities which came from the abundance of resources that came with the responsible use of the environment, that came with the sustainable urban development. Next, a healthy mix of modes of transportation. Now, this is a given in sustainable urban development. In the recent years, it has been a huge problem that people are not relying on public transportation anymore, and every family or every person has their own private vehicle. Now, this is one of the reasons why there is traffic congestion. And when there is a healthy mix of modes of transportation, even people who own their own vehicles would know when it is right to walk, to use the bicycle, or to use public transportation, and not mainly rely on their own private vehicle. And as a result, it could positively impact the traffic situation in a specific city or even a country. Next is cheap financial environmental costs. Why is this a result of sustainable urban development? Because obviously, sustainable practices always aims on using less of the environment, using less resource, and maximize on the results that we want to achieve. As we mentioned, there is a decoupling of living standards. in which economic growth no longer has to put pressures on the environment. This is the result of that decoupling, cheap financial environmental costs. There is less requirement for us to pay or for us to spend money just to just to make sure that our end result is achieved. So basically here we become more efficient because of sustainable practices. And the great resilience of disaster, which is a given because we were able to successfully preserve the environment as a result of sustainable or urban development, which, as I repeat, is a reduction of the effects of climate change. Now, this ends my presentation for today, and I hope you find it entertaining. Thank you for listening, and once again, a pleasant afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Kyle, for the group of urban development application, sustainable urban development application. So, short lang ako idugang sa gi-share ni Tubes because I already presented it in class, no? Let me just highlight two items na gi-mention ni sa presentation now. The first one is the idea of sustainable urban development, not merely measured or set as a barometer based on the development of an urban environment or development of what is called as built environment. Um, Traditional way of seeing things than before is that when we kind of know that urban development is happening when we kind of see a community becoming economically upstanding or economically booming, no? We kind of think that uh, urban development is defined by the infrastructure being developed, by the urbanization of a community, or maybe because a community had advanced themselves in terms of its economic and social needs. But as mentioned sa atong report, it's not, because the more recent understanding of sustainable urban development is that we look at both the environment and the social aspect of the community. It's like saying it should be a balance of everything, and more so because encompassing anitanan is our environment. Before kay ang pagtanaw man sa social sa urban development is that the city is booming when all infrastructure development or economic value and social needs are addressed, and then nalimtan ang environment. Now the more advanced application is that when you look at a city, you also look at the environment where the city is. So apil ang iyang forest reserve, ang iyang water, surface water nga opportunity para sa community. Apil ang iyang landscape sa area nga provide para sa community. Are there parks? Are there vegetations? Are there trees? Are there forests? Are there water parks that you are kind of maintaining and retaining for the community? That's where development is being balanced with the built application and the environmental or natural application. So now people are looking at, if you build a city, you kind of take a balance kung unsa pud ang iyang natural environment sa city. So that karon ang measurement sa development is not just putting value on the man-made application, but also retaining what is the natural environment application. The other side of that, as I mentioned sa presentation ni Chubbs, is that when you look at social inclusion, so a development which is geared for the inclusive application and equity for all concept. Inclusive is that it's not just because people working there benefits from the environment that they have, but also the one which are marginalized and who are really poor, no? So provisions of equity or equal development for all is a priority. Dili lang because daghan na ang naa sa middle class and upper class nga malimtan pud ang mga nasa lower class. When you talk about urban development, it's development for all. It's a balance, it's equitable, and it's inclusive to all. So if you kind of see a city nga na-develop pero naa siya mga slum areas or naa siya mga kaning gitawag na to na ay social blights in terms of the poor and the marginalized, then that's not actually a developed community. That's a community which has a problem, an underlying problem, which is poverty. maybe naanang siya facades of beauty and facade of seeing things as a very upstanding community because naa siyang rich kaayo og technology or rich kaayo nga man-made applications, but then again sa social needs sa tao wala siya nahatod ang service sa health, ang provisions for healthy and well-being for all, and even the opportunity for work for all and employment for all, or a society which doesn't have a gender inequality, no. Sometimes that's the one that's being overlooked, no, when you cannot give even the opportunity to everyone fairly and in balance, no. The second one is the other idea of social inclusion, which also says something about what we do for the community in terms of that aspect. So for example, when disaster happens, when climate change impacts the community, the first one who are affected are really those who are very poor and marginalized because they cannot afford new shelters, or they cannot even afford new opportunity for them to build up their own opportunities, no. So that's where cities will have to be addressing a balance in terms of social development. Like sa nahitabo sa Cagayan, when we had Sendong, mas nakita nato nga ang mga tao din nga nagpuyo sa lower area, which are really poor or marginalized, are not able to recover. And so therefore, all projects after that for the community of Cagayan was really to give shelter for all. So nag-build tag National Housing Authority, giboost na to atong housing and shelter development para sa ilaha. So that those in the lower area will be able to go up, live on the higher ground, and protect themselves from such concerns of the community. Given them also jobs and opportunity kay na-displace man sila sa ilang trabaho. Note ninyo, no? When we do development, everything na urban development sa atua is equivalent to money. It means nga natang logistics, natang technology, natang communication, and everything. But at the end of the day, if something happens to the community, it's still us who pays for that. We pay for the rehabilitations and repairs of everything infrastructure-related development. Kung nadaot siya, naguba siya tungkol sa climate change. And kinsa man kinsa man pud na siya nga ma-blame. It's also because of us, nga human as we are, and our activities creates the climate change impact. And so therefore, iato pong responsibility in terms of social justice ang pag-give sa opportunity sa naigo sa atong community, nga members atong community nga naapektahan because they are the one who are really marginalized. So that's the reason na kung makita ninyo, development in Lumbia is really housing for the poor, so that those in the lower area sa old na Cagayan, barangay 1 to 40, can be placed na sa higher ground, special residential community. We can afford putting in place kanang vertical structure sa atong downtown area, so that in a way, kung na ay disaster mag-happen, dili ang tanan nga mga tao nga naanap puyo, natulog, nagpahulay, mamatay lang sa kagabion kay tungod sa nahitabo nga baha. So those things matters a lot in terms of social development and at the same time urban development. So that's also where we, civil engineer, works hand in hand with the community infrastructure, no? Like we build bridges which are more resilient for conveying people in need when their disaster happen. We protect our environment in terms of terrain when there is a mid area, kind of problems sa landslide or seismic actions. And we provide also shelters if there's need for relief and evacuation. So those things are our role in the community as engineers. Dili man siguro ta frontliners for COVID-19, but we provide the infrastructure for COVID-19. When doctors and nurses need shelter for immediate supply and support for community for any forms of application, we provide transportation, we provide road networks, we provide enforcement, we provide infrastructure. So those things are part of social inclusion, social equity, and inclusiveness for all. And that's actually part of our overarching sustainable development, no? Environment, social, and economic. Kay at the end of the day, ang atong kwarta sa economic value sa community, mahatod gyapon sa needs sa community kung wala nato na provide ang importante nga needs sa tao. So right now, atong community sa Cagayan, ang ihang kwarta nahatod gyud sa COVID-19. During Sendong, nahatod gyud siya sa disaster rehabilitation and repair and maintenance of everything. And hatod gyud siya pagpalit og yuta para mabutangan ang puy-anan ang mga tao nga nanginahanglan og shelter because sila ang napektahan sa Sendong. So overarching na siya sa social, economic, and environmental applications of sustainable development. So thank you kayo sa group for presenting that in a context. No? Sige, let's have the third group.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon. Energy conservation, can you start?
Okay, ma'am.
Muragway audio Brent ba?
Walay audio.
Wala.
Hmm. Sa ako man eh. Yay ka. Di madungdan ang audio ba?
Wala pa nimo i-play. Play na.
Oo, balik, mama.
Brent, murag yung headset isaba, Brent.
Ma'am?
Isaba yung headset. Okay. Sige, play ang audio.
Wala gyapon Brent.
Dar, pwede ma-play sa imong end? Basta nasa ilang link, pati ato na lang i-play.
Sige, ma'am. Apa na lang, ma'am. Wait lang.
Okay na, Brent, si Darren lang sa ha.
Wait lang, pangitan sa ako.
Okay, while waiting for Darren, kindly plug in the information and the notice. No, the first one is we will have to submit your pre-final project next week, Saturday, for the solid waste management and exercise. Please submit that on Saturday next week. Kasi June naman siya, mag 2 weeks naman next week. And the other one is that we will have the midterm exam tomorrow. So first part sa midterm exam is modified true and false, and the second part is a identification, and the third part is essay. So ang first part nga identification and ang second part nga modified true and false will be a triad nga scoring based on the group, but the last item, which is actually a essay, will be individual for the group. So I'll open the exam room or the exam an exercise by 6 o'clock tomorrow. So please note, I will be plugging information by 5 o'clock so that dali ra makasulod sa 6 o'clock. So please take note of that. Topics for the midterms will include lessons 1 to 5 of my presentations before midterm, and the midterm is identification, modified true and false, and the essay. Again, sa essay is individual mag-answer, whereas ang katong first two items will be group work, no, or triad na work. Okay, so that's the exam for tomorrow, 6 o'clock Saturday. The third item is this afternoon. I will meet with the group who are having issues with attendance. What time gali ko dar? Sa notice ni Aubrey. I forgot if it's
7 p.m., ma'am.
sige, okay ra 7 p.m. because I have a meeting with the RC by 8 o'clock. So I just need to discuss the the ruling of the university with regards to failure due to absences and those who have incurred a lot of absences during the class in CEM2. So let's discuss that one. Naatagaan mo sa link ni Darren, especially katong highlight na main kaganina. Please meet us together with the other sections na naapoy attendance issues from other students in the other classes. So, and then lastly, the fourth item is that ang atong topic lesson has about, if I'm not wrong, we have six, no? So the first three items will be rendered as a quiz one, and the second three items sa inyong presentation will be rendered as quiz two. So the quiz is take home for the triad. Darren, pagyug ko sa first three sets of kanang presentation slides and the last three sets of presentation slides para sa quiz ani nga class. I will open the exercise on Monday. Sorry, Monday. Yeah, Monday and Wednesday so that you can submit on time the requirements for the take-home quiz. Okay ba na, Dar?
Yes, ma'am.
I-buffer lang ko. I will open the quiz room by siguro 6 o'clock in the evening on Monday, another 6 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday. And then you kind of submit within that day lang gihapon ang exercise. A triad again siya. So ang first quiz will be katong first presentation 1, 2, and 3. And the last presentation today, 1, 2, and 3 again, or 4, 5, and 6, no? Sige.
Sige, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Kaidar. Okay, let's start with the presentation na dayon. Wala siya sound, Dar.
And
Kini, ma'am.
today, I'm going to present to you about energy conservation in sustainable urban engineering. So, what is energy conservation? Energy conservation is the decision and practice of using less energy. It means reducing the consumption of energy by producing or using less of it. This could be in the form of using fewer energy sources or using devices that require less energy. Refraining from using services or products is one way to conserve energy, but this can also be done by using more energy efficient products designed to consume less energy than their standard counterpart. Energy conservation is a big part of sustainability and sustainable development. When we lower the amount of energy we use, we slow down fossil fuel depletion and help clean up the environment. So, why is it important? What is the motivation? For a variety of reasons, energy conservation is critical. It also helps you save money on energy costs, such as utility bills and other energy bills, by lowering our dependency on non-renewable energy supplies, such as fossil fuels. Conserving energy also reduces the amount of new development in regions where natural resource extraction, such as oil or even lithium, has a negative influence on the environment. We can lower the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the environment by conserving energy and using it more efficiently. People conserve energy for two major reasons: to gain more control over their energy bill and to minimize demand on the Earth's natural resources. Energy conservation is, quote unquote, the prevention of the wasteful use of energy, especially in order to ensure its continuing availability. This is according to the official Collins definition. This is important to note because there is another definition of the term. In physics, energy conservation is defined as the principle by which the total energy remains constant in a system that is not subject to external input. The fact that the general use definition precedes the description of energy conservation in physics shows how important the concept has become in everyday life. Due to the current issues facing energy consumption and its associated limits, the meaning of energy conservation today mainly encompasses ways to prevent wasteful use of energy in the environment. So, what are the applications? There are a variety of approaches to lowering your household's energy use, ranging from modest lifestyle changes to major housing renovation. Saving money on power bills and protecting the environment are the two main reasons for saving energy. Here are some of the techniques to save energy and save power in your house that are prescribed here. Number one, energy efficient measures in domestic appliances. Adjusting your day to day behavior. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy energy efficient appliances to cut down on your home's energy use. Turning off lights and appliances when they're not in use is a simple way to save energy. You may also save energy by doing household duties by hand, such as hanging your clothes to dry instead of putting them in the dryer, or hand washing your dishes. Number two, energy efficient measures in buildings. Traditional incandescent light bulbs use a lot of energy and need to be replaced more frequently than their energy efficient counterparts. Number three, energy efficient measures in cars. Fuel efficient cars have a number of benefits. They produce fewer CO2 emissions, lowering their impact on the environment and contributing to the climate change. They consume less fuel and are less expensive to run also. So how is it done? What are the methods? There are many methods to save energy. Most of these involve refraining from using energy consuming devices whenever possible, though some rely on energy efficient products and practices. Here are some simple ways you can conserve energy and become more energy efficient. First, by turning things down. Because energy cannot be created or destroyed, energy conservation focuses on preserving rather than destroying it. By turning things down, it can be one of the most effective ways to save energy. Number two, by turning off and unplugging things that are not in use. Some things are better left turned off entirely because they use energy even when they're not in use. Many appliances and equipment should be unplugged or switched off when not in use, even though it is preferable to turn the heat down rather than off, since there are places that must be heated to some degree. By turning off a ceiling fan or air conditioner while leaving a room, as well as turning off the television when no one is viewing it, it can help save a lot of energy. Number three, by substituting and be more efficient. One strategy to practice energy efficiency and accomplish energy conservation is to substitute certain devices for others. Some things and devices are necessary to use on a regular basis, but replacing them with more energy efficient alternatives could save you money. For example, by purchasing more energy efficient equipment such as an Energy Star approved washer and dryer, or replace a standard shower head with a low flow model that uses less treated water. Lastly, by doing it yourself. Using human power instead of a machine to perform the task saves energy. When possible, walking or taking a bike instead of driving. Also, using a hand saw instead of an electric saw when working in construction. And in cleaning the fields, you can use a push mower instead of a gas lawnmower. Just think about how much petrol and energy you'd save if you walked or rode your bike to work or the grocery store instead of driving. Sustainability. What is sustainability? According to UN Brundtland Commission 1987, it is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The term sustainability has been broadly applied to characterize improvements in areas like natural resources overexploitation, manufacturing operations, where its energy use and polluting subproducts, the linear consumption of product, the direction of investment, citizens' lifestyle, consumer purchasing behaviors, technological developments, or business in general institutional changes, as long as an action causes little less or no harm to the natural world. Under the belief, although it is not always ensured, ecosystems will keep on operating and generating the conditions that allow for the quality of life of today's modern societies not to decrease. Someone is often claimed to be sustainable. These are the definition terms. Global warming. It is used to describe the planet's rising temperature and climate change. Refers to the consequences of global warming. For example, the changes in sea level, cold snaps, droughts, hurricanes, melting glaciers, and wildfires. By limiting your energy consumption, it has a positive impact on the environment. When we burn fossil fuels, we release a massive amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases, which include carbon dioxide, build up quicker than the atmosphere can absorb them, preventing Earth from maintaining a consistent temperature. The act of conserving energy allows us to save coastal cities from the rising sea level, protects the reefs, it improves the water quality, it improves air quality, and reduces the risk of respiratory disease. These are the references. And that is all. Thank you for listening. My name is Alban Paul, the representative of this group.
Thank you, Kai, sa presentation. Kita na-present again.
Si Elbrent, ma'am.
Elbrand. Tapos hindi ni mao. Elbrand is ano no? Energy conservation.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, hello.
Okay, just lang ha. Okay. Sige, thank you Kai sa presentation. Ako lang i-add, no? When we talk about energy conservation, this is actually more electrical, but because ang byproduct sa energy for this application sa electrical engineering is actually atong gamit for civil works application. So let me just highlight na there are two types of energy na supply sa atong environment. Number one is what we call as renewable energy, and the other one is non-renewable energy. So ang non-renewable energy, mao ni siya ang nuclear energy, coal, and diesel-fueled energy. And then renewable is kanang hydropower, solar, geothermal, wind, and what's the other one? A wave energy. So these ones renewable is because we do not so much create impact to the environment. Rather, we utilize what is already in the environment, and we kind of produce energy through that resource material, which is from the natural environment. The non-renewable is we extract raw material from the natural environment and utilize that as a material to be burned, to be used for energy nga demand nato. And usually exhaustible na siya. Exhaustible would mean mahurot over time, no? Ang mga non-renewable energy. So in Cagayan de Oro, we have actually renewable and non-renewable energy because the demand of the city of uh, energy requirement is really very high. We have industrial, we have commercial, and we also have residential needs, no, sa community. So for commercial, normally mga malls, mga offices, institutions needs that for commercial application. Residential is really for housing, whereas industrial is really for companies, no? Labi na sa Cagayan, we do have industries. So atong source for non-renewable energy, we have two: coal burning, which is in Stayag and FDC in Villanueva. And the second one that we have is diesel fuel engine, diesel fuel nga energy, sa Minergy. So Minergy is in Tablon. They burn bunker fuels, which are imported to our country. Bunker fuels are byproducts of diesel fuel, which are not really clear fuel. So they are just utilized as a secondary or last entry sa fuel refinement, and because dili kayo siya clear nga diesel, so it's utilized for diesel engine power generation. So Minergy supply diesel engine power supply sa atong community sa Cagayan. The other one is importation of coal from countries like Asian countries nga to neighbor like Indonesia. There are different kinds of coal grades. So ang coal is graded as a poor quality, high quality, medium quality. So na yung mga grades sa coal before siya gi-import sa Philippines for the application of coal burning sa STEAG or sa FDC. So these are coal power generating plants sa Villanueva, no? So we have Villanueva coal plants. Again, the source material, which is coal, is imported from other country, and we burn that for our power generation sa community sa Cagayan. So if ma-notice ninyo dili kayo nato ma-feel na siya kay we have different sources, no? We have also hydro from Maria Cristina National Government Power Corporation. We also have Sipalco, their own solar plant in The Hague, so natay solar generation. And then of course other than that, we have also the ones which is non-renewable. But in the Philippines, we also have a geothermal plant kanang exhaust gas from natural environment. Geothermal is a form of wind turbine application. But geothermal iyahang wind ay ang source kay it's heating up from a geothermal kanang exhaust, and so the generation of energy is really geothermal. And then we have wind farms in Samar Leyte, I believe. Wind farms, rotating blades of wind, similar to the wind vane or wind farms in some countries like in the US and in Netherlands. They harness energy to wind generation. And the more modern one that is applied in other countries is the tidal or wave energy generation. So using coastal wave and coastal uh, reactions to movements of waves, they use a turbine again, and the turbine rotates the rotor, and the rotor rotates the magnetic system that creates the electrical energy from mechanical to electrical. So what is uh, definitely what is the concept here is that in the global sense of things, when there's so much demand for energy, usually 80% of the demand is supplied by non-renewable energy. So it's actually nuclear, coal, and those non-renewable energy. Because kusog iyahang ginahatod nga energy with minimal cost in sense, no? But the problem is that dili pud siya safe for our environment, especially when we experience climate change, no? Like what happens in Fukushima, Japan, nga nagkaroon siya ng tsunami, and that tsunami created infrastructure leaks sa uh, nuclear plant in Fukushima. The same with what happened in Chernobyl, Russia. There was a kind of earthquake, and what happens is nagkaroon ng nuclear leak ang planta, and a lot of people were affected by the leak, the radiation leak from the nuclear plant, and a lot of people suffered with various forms of mutation sa ilang genetic identity, at the same time sa ilang mga physicality. Some of them are died of that kind of sickness resulting from nuclear exposure, radiation exposure rather. So that's the adverse effect of kind of mga non-renewable energy application. In the case of coal sa Cagayan, our problem is that coal burning is actually not good for the environment. So what is done sa FDC and sa STEAG is they make sure that the system that they have filters the pollution to the environment. So naas like cleaning system within sa ilang planta when they burn coal. And the corporate social responsibility nila, ang CSR, corporate social responsibility nila is that they provide kaning what we call as system which is really clean for pollution. They also make sure that the coal that they're burning is high grade quality para hindi siya magkaroon ng ash or fly ash due to coal burning. They also make sure that social responsibility in terms of employing people from the community is there para sila could aware sa ilahang planta, no? There's a sense of ownership sa community because ang planta doon sa ilaha, kasaga sila na nanabaho sa planta, and they have kind of value that they make sure also that the plant is doing well in terms of its service, no? The other one is they provide also kanang tree planting for watershed in the entire Misamis Oriental or Region 10 or Mindanao, of Mindanao rather. Because ang corporate social responsibility sa government is if you impact one area, you kind of provide sustainable applications sa other areas. So ilang sustainable is they plant trees o pila ka hectares of trees in place for burning coal. So that's a corporate social responsibility. Now, in the sense of doing things sa ato sa construction, we do also the same principle of applying sustainable urban development sa atong energy conservation sa atong housing development or sa atong construction works. We do not waste energy in terms of power just because we need that power for our construction detailed application. And even if na-build na ang balay, we make sure that inside the house or inside the building, we apply conservation of energy. Maybe harnessing solar energy from a solar installation in a given building so that in itself the building can sustain its own energy. Using material which is sustainable in terms of energy conservation, like insulators, no? Sa one countries, they do insulation sa ilahang mga wall panels sa ilang balay or sa ilang building so that they would not need so much heating during winter for heaters warming the room, or they during summer they do not use so much ventilation of air conditioning because of the too much warmth outside the environment and humid environment. So doing that is an effort to ensure that inside the building the occupants are actually able to restrain themselves from using so much energy in terms of air conditioning and heater, depende sa weather condition. Also, with the design inside the building, when we do aesthetic design, making sure that we have high ceiling and lighting area so that not what we call as provisions for lighting and provisions for air ventilations and airflow. In a way, if we centralize, for example, heating or we centralize air conditioning, that means that it's not just one room benefits from the cooling system or the heating system, no? But because there's an entirety of the system being maybe one appliance creating that system ambient air control for the entire building. So that's the sense of doing energy conservation. The other one is we suggest, we advise our clients to use kanang mga green appliances such as air conditioning, heater, refrigeration, water heater nga kuan siya kaning energy efficient kanang mga 3 stars, 5 stars o na green energy nga mga performing equipment. So right now, the old air conditioning system nga pangit kay performance in terms of efficiency of cooling, ato na nagidibang, ginapulihan na natong mga bag-o nga air conditioning system which are energy efficient. When we use electric fan, we kind of use electric fan which are naay solar o naay kaning power charging so that during walay kuryente, we can use that one. And of course, we make sure also that we conserve energy through that appliance, no? So these things are matters in terms of energy conservation. And apart from energy conservation, methodology in terms of the applications of building is also kita nga mag-end user, no? We kind of encourage everyone to switch on light appropriately at a given time of the day so that we conserve energy. We do not use mga old nga equipment nga kusog kay mukaon og kuryente like iron, washing and drying of clothing murag karaan na kay nga system na kusog kay ma-consume. So every time you buy something, you kind of think sa investment if it is energy efficient. Because in the long run, kung barato siya, pag start at nimubay, pilo ang long run niya nga usage is kusog mo ka og kuryente, that's not actually energy efficient. So we start with, let's say, toaster, oven, blender, things that matters a lot sa atong need as human, no? So, our need for use and consumption or utilizations of material, we kind of see things in terms of energy. That way, we kind of also contributes to helping out sustainable efforts in terms of energy conservation. Now, before ang mga welding machine for constructions are really very expensive, and then of course, kusog kay kuryente nga kaon, no? And sa una, gina-consider pa na if they will use diesel for generator or katong mga old systems of doing things to power energy sa usa ka construction site. But now we have modern system, and some of these are very energy efficient. We kind of look at this in terms of a trend that will enhance sustainable effort. And so in the future, kung kamo ang mga engineers sa construction, we look at these things and see if it balance out efficiency, sustainable effort, at the same time cost implications sa usa ka system. A lot of people will say that green building, the efforts to sustainable development, basta construction, gali ang apelin siya, expensive with siya. That is really true. Sa start, it's very expensive. It's up to you as engineer to explain to your client why is it expensive at the start of the project. Later on, the sustainable effort pacing itself in the long run sa imuhang product, which is a green building or a green effort na building. So systems within indoor systems can be energy conservation related. The construction of the building or the infrastructure could be energy efficient. The materials inside being used for the building in terms of construction, raw materials for every parts of the building can be energy efficient as well. At the same time, the inculcation of practices inside and during construction can be part of the energy conservation effort for sustainable development. Okay? See. So next group na dayon pa. I think last group na ni Shadar.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's have the last group. Wala na say sound.
Hello
Kini, ma'am.
everyone, I am on the Saga
Ay, na,
topic.
okay na.
We're going to present our topic on life cycle impact assessment, prepared by my group mates Leonara Tumarong and Juju. So before we jump into life cycle impact assessment, let us first define and understand where it originated. Life cycle impact assessment is basically a part of life cycle assessment. Now, what is life cycle assessment, or for short, LCA? ISO 14001, or what is called the Environment Management System, LCA, is defined as a tool to assess the impact of products or services on our environment. Assessment can be categorized into two steps, cradle to gate and cradle to grave, in which we define cradle as the collection of the raw materials or extract materials. So for cradle to gate, it refers to the assessment of product from the raw material extraction to the factory gate. This type of assessment does not consider the use of the product nor its end life consideration. While cradle to grave considers everything from harvesting of raw materials to the disposal of the finished goods. So to make sense of this assessment, we have a picture on the right that shows an example of LCA. Basically, we can see that the process of assessing the life of a product is just a continuous cycle of evaluating its process from the manufacturing of raw materials to the disposal of the product, on which we can observe that each production process actually impacts the Earth's environment, which in return also affects the process itself. Now that we have defined LCA, Let me take you back to the history of its development. LCA started out around 1960s to 1970s, where the first studies of LCA began, and it continued to be developed through the 90s. And then after decades of standardization and elaboration, it led to the development of the life cycle sustainability analysis in 2010. And up until the present, LCA is continuously developing to adapt to the science of time. As for the next slide, we have here the life cycle assessment procedure, where basically it shows the methods used in life cycle assessment, which starts on the goal and scope. This phase involves the definition of the study goals and system boundaries. Then it moves to the life cycle inventory, which describes the flow across the life cycle of system material from extraction to the end of life. After that, a life cycle impact assessment is done, where results are translated into relevant environmental impacts that later on are used in the interpretation of the consequences of the environmental impacts established. Now that we have an insight of how life cycle assessment procedure is done, we will now move on to our topic of interest. Among the four phases in the procedure, we will be focusing more into the third phase, which is the life cycle impact assessment. Life cycle impact assessment, or LCIA, is a method of converting the inventory data into sets of impacts. The impact assessment focuses on the impact associated with the production, use, and disposal of the product, especially the ecological system degradation, resource depletion, and of course the human health and welfare. So here we also have the protocol for the impact assessment, which is LCIA elementary steps. It is composed of three mandatory steps which are seen in green: the selection of impact categories, classification, and categorization, while normalization and weighing are considered to be optional elements. So for our fifth slide, we have here the definition of terms of the four phases of LCA that we have already discussed earlier. So let us move on to the sixth slide. So now, why should we conduct LCA? Why is this relevant? Well, some of the importance of conducting LCA are: one is compliance to the government. Since we are implementing an environmental movement in our society, by conducting and practicing the LCA, we can ensure compliance with the government regulations for its environmental plans and goals. Next is that it also decreases environmental impact, as it allows us to interpret and understand the effect of a product or service, all while reshaping the company's strategy. Again, since we are moving towards a greener environment, this helps companies reshape their strategies in making their products more sustainable. Lastly, is it helps in product marketing. Since as consumers, we prefer products that are eco-friendly rather than those that are not. So basically, with this one, it already helps boost the product marketing. So now that we know the relevance of LCA, let us discuss how LCA is applied to different industries. One is in building construction. There was a study conducted on constructing infrastructures that considered LCA as a method of evaluating how to construct more sustainable buildings through reducing the environmental impact of buildings. And LCA can also be applied in the process industry, in which with LCA, process system engineering tools are used to produce more calibrated analysis on machinery. Then we also have production and consumption, where LCA is used to study the environmental impacts of the raw material extraction and processing to create high added value products. One example of which are sugarcane that are processed by large companies to create high added value products such as sugar. Moving on to the eighth slide, we have a specific application of life cycle impact assessment. Here we have a study in China where they evaluated impact assessments of MSU, or in municipal solid waste treatment systems, which were used to reduce negative impacts to the environment. So now that we know LCA and LCIA are used in different fields to attain sustainability, let us consider how impact assessments are done. So first, to grasp the idea of assessing the impact of a product, we have here an example. For this example, our product is copy paper. We need to assess the impact associated in production, usage, and disposal of the copy paper, which includes evaluating its ecological system through considering the risk on the abiotic and biotic factors in the environment. Then we also consider the resources needed to produce the copy paper, whether it's renewable or non-renewable. And lastly, in assessing the impact of a copy paper, we should consider the impacts of the product on human health. Furthermore, the impact factors we considered earlier are processed through LCIA protocol elements. So as discussed earlier, we have here the 5 LCIA steps composed of 3 mandatory steps and 2 optional elements. The first step of LCIA is selecting the impact categories of a product in accordance with the study, together with its indicators and characterization model. Then we assign the inventory results to the selected impact categories that you can base on the picture here on the right. Then in categorization, we calculate the indicator results. Then the indicator scores are calculated relative to the reference information. And lastly, we convert these results to numerical factors based on value choices. For example, copy paper production produces CO2 emissions, which we can assign to the climate change category. Then we use the third step to categorize how much CO2 can impact climate change. Then in normalization, we can find how much the impact of climate change can affect a person. And lastly, we can convert the results and compare them across damage categories. So to summarize the discussion in relation to the sustainability subject, we ask ourselves 2 questions, which are: one is, how do we supply society's needs without harming the environment or future generations' ability to meet their needs? And second is, how to choose the best option. So LCA and LCIA are related with sustainability through the following: supporting a holistic perspective on the environmental impacts of the product system, because LCA manages the impact of the life cycle of a product through LCIA. For the second one, LCIA principle attempts to model any impact from the system which can be expected damage the areas of protection. That then means that the LCA sees through the process of the product from cradle to gate or cradle to grave and allows the process to adapt sustainability to the impact. Then for the last two, many options to choose demand and it helps to inform choices. So as for this one, since LCA allows us to see through it, it also allows us to see many options and know more choices. And with that, it ends our presentation. Although LCA is a very wide-range topic, I hope we have discussed the vital points of the life cycle assessment. Thank you so much for your time. The last page would be our reference.
Thank you tayo sa presentation for life cycle impact assessment or life cycle analysis of impacts. So I'd like to highlight lang sa life cycle assessment because this is very new to us sa civil engineering application. It's more applied than before sa industrial application sa mga IE, industrial engineering. The thing that they do is that katong sample nga cradle to grave, grave to grave, and cradle to cradle applications. Wala man kayo na-explain sa grupo, but at least ang pinaka-essence or the concept is that when you produce something like a product or a material, well, you kind of look at the holistic approach of producing the material from start to end, from birth of the material until the material is highly utilized or is already overused or has reached its life cycle, no? Or in a sense, from giving birth to a material to the life and end of a material. So life cycle assessment is really looking at if the material that we have or we have developed creates impact to the environment. And that's where it comes into be called life cycle impact assessment. We assess, we evaluate if from start to finish, material impacts the environment. So sometimes it begins with the material itself, the raw material that we are using, and then understanding how that raw material impact in terms of extraction or impact in terms of transportation, transporting the material to the area where it will be processed later on. So that's the start, no, ang raw material, ang cost sa pag-transport and pag-extract. If it is being mined, that's a great impact to the environment. Not say, for example, reinforcing steel bars or metal works. So we extract from mining iron ores or metal ores to create that metal. And so pag-extract pa lang sa mining area, pag-transport ana niya entails cost and impact to the environment. And then, of course, the other part is when the material is already manufactured or processed. So atong sample is metal works, no? So if we process the material for, let's say, a metal work, which is reinforcing steel bars, no? Processing this material is in a way a concept of smelting plants. Smelting industry will be burning the raw material to extract the metal from the iron ore. Okay? So kung ma-extract na nimong metal, katong waste niya nga imong gisunog, mahimo to siyang ash and that will be have to be disposed sa environment balik. But these are raw material which is made of rock and soil and aggregates, no? Kay once mo melt to metal, ang metal nga mo melt, mahimo siyang liquid ang form, and that liquid form will now be transported to a more liquid, more formworks nga mahimo siyang usa ka metal plate or metal nga bars ana. So burning in itself in a manufacturing company for metal is burning, which is pollution, no, related, and it's impacting the environment. So again, the product which is metal processed through manufacturing or industrial application is actually related to burning, and in a way the process is actually impacting the environment in terms of pollution. And once the material is being already sold to the market, for example, kung it's used for construction and all, yeah, at certain time, magamit siya for reinforcement, maybe for structural members, non-structural members. But at the end of the day, sa iyang life cycle, evaluation sa iyang pag-age, wear and tear, ang material mo deteriorate, ang material mo, at the end of the day, pwede siya mahimong byproduct nga debris from kaning road construction or vertical construction nga rehabilitation and repair. So ang mga waste adto nga material nga metalworks will be thrown sa garbage or sa dump sites. And for some people in some country, ilan ang gina-scavenge as kanang junk material, no? And that's utilized for other forms. That's okay. Magamit pa siya para ma-reuse and magamit and recycled siya for another purpose. Kuna siya kung wala siya nagtaya or wala siya kay na-deteriorate para magamit pa sa another purpose. But if nagtaya siya or na-deteriorate and fully na-embed siya sa concrete debris, dili na nimo kay siya ma-extract ang metal unless imong gubaon ang concrete. So what happens is that some people just throw it away in the disposal area. That creates impact to the environment because solid waste of such harm any vegetative area. Kay ang ihang material kay toxic sa environment, and over time dili siya dali ma-degrade, dili siya biodegradable, kay dili siya organic material. So in a way it stays in the land site and it becomes pollution to a solid waste pollution to our soil and our land. So that's the concept when we have a sample of life cycle assessment for a metal formworks that extracted from raw, process, and then used over time. So in a way, life cycle assessment, it's telling us that we have to look at how we produce the product and how we kind of mitigate those things in terms of product, no? I'll take an example for sa usa ka industrial company, dili siya civil but more on sa manufacturing of textile. The brand which is Uniqlo, for example, the Japanese brand nga Uniqlo, they produce a clothing material which is actually from raw, producing clothing, and then clothing ilang i-market, and then pag market nila kana may branding, they kind of tell their customers and their clients nga if ma-overuse na nimo, ma-wear and tear ang imong clothing material, pwede ninyo ibalik sa shop kay ilan nang i-recycle for you. No? That's the commitment nila for corporate social responsibility. That if they produce this product, part sa ilahang management of the product, which is waste, will be returned to them so that they will manage it for you. Some of them are recycled to become another fabric material, reused and recycled and reused to become a new material, and some of which are retained and repaired para mahatag sa mga third world country nga nanginahanglan og clothing, especially kung na mga disaster or na needs sa ka community. So that's the commitment nila sa corporate social responsibility sa usa ka brand. And some companies already embrace that idea, no? Nga when we produce something from source, process to the actual selling of the material, we kind of recall this material and ask our customers and clients, return it to us, we will recycle it for you, we will reuse that for you for another form or another company. So that's the reason why some of this uh, company that value sustainable effort are being patronized as well sa ubang country, because they kind of know na ang iyahang branding creates that sustainable effort. I'm not just saying one brand, no, it's actually encompassing other brands, and that's where we come in to say there's such thing as circular economy. Circular economy is incorporating life cycle impact assessment, product development, and recycling of material, no, the 5 R's, I think, of how we do zero waste management. Because what happens is that the community will agree kung sa ilang i-produce nga product, the government will ensure the policy, people will actually buy the material or the product, but then of course they are responsible as well sa product. And the company that will handle the waste later on will send it to another company, maybe a sister company or a company with nashe cooperation, nga kani po na company will do the use and the recycling, at the same time the reproducing of another product. That way, dugay kato siya nga material mabalik sa environment and highly optimize iyang utilization, and at the end of the life cycle niya, na-exhaust yun mo iyang material quality. So an example of that is companies again nga kaning, for example, any clothing company that they will produce a material, thread and whatnot, and they make it into clothes, and clothing will be wear and tear from the client, ibalik sa company, and then that company will have another company who will help them produce another product, and then ibaligya na sa nila at a lower cost, or ihatag nila as a corporate social responsibility as relief effort for disaster. And then until nga ma-exhaust gid ang material, mabalik to siya sa environment as already biodegradable material. That's circular economy. So the concept of circular economy in line with product development for sustainable effort, life cycle assessment or impact assessment for sustainable effort, at the same time, zero waste management for sustainable urban development application. So those are really the same na sa circular economy. In fact, sa other countries na nag-push good sa ideas sa circular economy, they are saying that once a company produce a product, kailangan mapakita siya sa life cycle assessment sa product, at the same time sa zero waste management packaging, at the same time ang product development setup, so that makita holistically nganong i-produce nga product, para asa nga product, unsa ang tumong sa product, unsa ang value sa product, unsa dayon ang paghatod sa product sa iyang life cycle assessment, and then unsa pud ang end product in terms of recycling applications and reuse of materials, until such time na ma-decompose ang product back to the environment. That's life cycle assessment. The other thing sa atong civil works is that if we look at materials in terms of life cycle assessment, no, raw materials, ang example ganina is when we use materials sa atong environment available kaayo, di na ta mag-import, no, materials which are in our environment is made available for us, like bamboo, like a coconut tree, like any form of a fiber that we can use and utilize for construction, and then sa construction gamiton siya as part of our building. A lot of these efforts are being done right now. Sa una, kay gina-found siya as material because poor siya quality, dali siya ma-deteriorate, dali siya maguba, and so forth. But now, it's more amenable to everyone in terms of sustainable effort, no? Yeah, poor siya quality, but the quality in itself is biodegradable. It will not create impact to the environment, kaya dali siya ma-decompose. So that's already considered sustainable. So now they are looking at these things as opportunity para mag-create a product out of that, like kanang cocoa fiber being used as rag, cocoa fiber being used as roofing material, cocoa fiber being used for concrete application, cocoa fiber being used for tiling and application and roofing. So those a lot of things, mga cocoa fiber, vertebrate grass, um, bamboo fibers, a lot of these things are already considered. Even to the point nga ang bamboo, aged bamboo and aged na coconut tree lumbers are being used for reinforcement of housing or shelter. And even roofing from nipa and abaca and so forth are being used right now. The concept there is when you use this material which are environmentally friendly, these are adaptable to the environment that we have. Over time, madaot siya, maguba siya, but it's not a waste because it goes back to the environment as biodegradable material. But at the same time, if we want to optimize the lifetime of the material, we already incorporate engineering effort in terms of product development. Some of them already incorporate a treatment for wood, no, para dili siya ma-decay dali. A treatment for cocoa fiber material para pag mabutang siya sa imong concrete, maka-enhance siya sa property sa imong concrete in terms of physical property, strength, and mechanical properties of the material. These things matters a lot sa bago nga technology kan sa engineering. I think some of the adoptions right now sa one country is the use of the optimization of use of bamboo as a material na organic, treated bamboos which becomes viable material for construction application. So that's just an example for life cycle assessment. I think na-exhaust na ako sa akong discussion, and I thank everyone for the presentation. So far, wala bang question? Na bang question sa class? Wala? Tingog sadlo? Mingaw si Ma'am.
Kuan ma'am, magpa-clarify ako sa kanang quiz ma'am.
Sige, go ahead, Darren.
Kuan ma'am, so karong Monday mag-quiz ang katong first 3 groups na ni present ma'am.
Oo, take home siya.
Nya,
na ako i-abridar.
nya 6 PM ni may abri mo nya same day ang deadline ma'am para i-answer.
I think I'll give everyone mga 2 hours siguro to answer that quiz.
Ay, sige. So 6 to 8 ma'am.
Yeah.
Sige ma'am.
Dayon sa Wednesday, the same, that will be another, the last 3 na po na presentation of the class, no? For this afternoon, I have 5 ba? 4?
4 ma'am, 4 ang presentations ron.
Dar, palihog lang kog list o sa ang first 3 sa
Yes ma'am, yes ma'am.
chat box na to sa Google para dili na nako kay pag madinhi magud siya ma-erase dili, so that I can prepare on Sunday the quiz for Monday, and then on Tuesday I can prepare the quiz for Wednesday. So
Yes,
that we're done, that 2 quizzes that we have will be after midterms na quizzes, and then I'll give the project which is due on Saturday, the solid waste management exercise due on Saturday, and that will be all na dahil for the class of CM2. Next week on Tuesday, wala na yung presentation, but I will handle 2 topics, and that will be part of the exam di ay tuod. Part of the exam, the quiz di ay take home quiz. No, sa final exam na lang siguro na ko i-appeal final exam na application. Kasi I still have a final exam, probably oral exam. Ako pang i-think over.
Ganun.
So we're finished with our lessons next week. I'll just announce on Tuesday what will happen with CM2 exams, and then the remaining projects or remaining requirements for the class, including this afternoon or later, 7 o'clock, ang group attendance concern. Darren, by the way, reminder lang po, can we inform the Bidos, si Miles and si Neil, that we need the PICE credits, tama ba po? PICE credit points. I need that already as soon as possible kay mag-link ko grade. And then I also need the permit to exam, final exam permit.
Sige, ma'am.
Okay, sige. Thank you kaayo. Walay lain concern ng class before we get off? Okay, sige. Dar, paliw ko sa attendance kay it should be counted gihapon at for the class.
Yes, ma'am. Nag-check ako, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for the presenters this afternoon. I'll give you the grades later kung mahuman ako sa akong pag-sum up kaya pa na ako nakita yung handouts. Okay, so that's all for this afternoon, everyone, and I see you next week.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Project, ha? Don't forget your project. Okay. Bye-bye. Ayo-ayo mo ka na.